Wait for the stream to fire up across the internet, and when it's live, then we'll get rocking and rolling. We always have to wait just a few seconds until YouTube gets alive and well, and it looks like we're getting close. And there we are. Let's get started. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to yet another episode of Watching the Watchers Live. My name is Robert Gruler. I am a criminal defense attorney here at the R&R Law Group in the always beautiful and sunny Scottsdale, Arizona, where my team and I, over the course of many years, have represented thousands of good people facing criminal charges. And throughout our time in practice, we have seen a lot of problems with our justice system. I'm talking about misconduct involving the police. We have prosecutors behaving poorly. We have judges not particularly interested in a little thing called justice. And it all starts with the politicians, the people at the top, the ones who write the rules and pass the laws that they expect you and I to follow, but sometimes have a little bit of difficulty doing so themselves. And so that's why we started this show called Watching the Watchers, so that together with your help, we can shine that big, beautiful spotlight of accountability and transparency back down upon our very system with the hope of encouraging some meaningful change. And we're very grateful that you are here and with us today. We've got a lot to get into. We're going to start by talking about the FBI Director Wray. He was in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee today. Of course, this is all surrounding the events of the Capitol Hill that happened back on January 6th. We want some answers about it. And so the Senate Judiciary Committee hauled Christopher Wray out in front of them and asked him some questions. And what did he have to say? Well, it was a whole lot of I don't know. Some evidence, some information there, some things we can glean, but we're going to go through it. Got a couple clips from his testimony, as well as some reaction and some other stories that I've sort of been keeping my eye on since the tragic day on January 6th. So we got a lot to get into in that segment. Then we're going to change gears a little bit. We're going to talk about some criminal law. There's a very awful, gruesome case that has just hit sort of the books in court, has hit the docket. I'm talking about Brittany Gosney. This case is stemming out of Ohio. It involves her murdering her 6-year-old son and then disposing of the body in an Ohio river. And so she had her arraignment, her initial court date yesterday. We're going to break down that story. A little bit of a content warning on that. We're not showing any graphic imagery or anything like that, but just the subject is just awful. So that is coming up on this show today. Then we'll wrap up the show with a little bit of a change of gears again. We're going to dive back into Cuomo again. Cuomo's got a third accuser out there. 3. So we got to deal with some of the aftermath of the sausage fest yesterday, the sausage debacle, sausage gate, as it were. We're going to transition. Now he's got a third accuser. So we've got a lot to get into. Before we dive into it all, I want to invite you, if you have questions as we go through this program, I'm going to go through the stories, but if you have a question, we're going to take questions at the end of those segments. Those are all available, or you can go and ask those over at locals.com/watchingthewatchers, where Miss Faith is monitoring the live chat over there, and she's adding them into my slide deck. So we'll just get through those. Also, you can get a copy of the slides that I'm about to go through, as well as a copy of my book, Meet Some Good People, Hang Around. The web address is locals.com/watchingthewatchers. All right, so let's get into the news. The big story of the day is that FBI Director Christopher Wray was called into Congress, hauled in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee, because the country still has questions. We're coming up on about 2 months, just about 4 days away from 2 months, out from the January 6th Capitol Hill Riots, or the protest, the seditionist, insurrectionist debacle, whatever you want to call it. It's been 2 months, and we still don't have a lot of answers. We still don't know how Officer Brian Sicknick died. We still don't know exactly what the government's response to this is going to be. Are we going to hear more murmuring about, domestic surveillance or domestic terrorism or insurgency tactics to come and deal with this massive problem that they're telling us exists? And so he was hauled in front of Congress today. Christopher Wray, I'm talking about, the person who is in charge of all of this. He's the FBI director, the executive agency that's responsible for domestic law enforcement, that funnels cases over to the U.S. Attorney's Office, that is part of the executive branch under the supervision of the Department of Justice. This guy should have answers more than anybody does. And so we're all kind of excited about this, saying, hey, great, he's coming into Congress. Maybe he'll be able to shed some light on what is going on, but not so much. This story comes over from NBCnews.com. It says here, Christopher Wray sheds little new light on domestic terror, Capitol riot intel failures. Prior to the riot, Wray said the FBI tracked a large amount of information about potential violence, but he didn't explain what the FBI did with it. So they tracked a large amount of info before January 6th, but he didn't tell him what they did with it. Nobody asked, or people were asking him about it in Congress, and he didn't explain what they did with it. Yeah, we got a lot of information, but what do we do with it? Well, I don't know. We're going to see a lot of that type of language. His appearance before the Senate Judiciary Committee today was his first public testimony since September and the first formal statement from the FBI about the status of the riot investigation. So 2 months, first formal statement we're getting out of this guy, one of the most expansive in its history. 2 months. It was also his first opportunity to discuss why the FBI did not detect in advance what it now says in court documents was extensive plotting and planning by known extremist groups that attacked the Capitol in a coordinated fashion. Senators have largely avoided asking him specific questions about that. So why is that? So why are these senators not asking about it? Kind of an important question. Sounds like prior to January 6th, or I would say even after January 6th, the story that we heard throughout the media was that Donald Trump caused this. He was inciting insurrection. That was the whole basis of the impeachment trial that we went through. Spent a lot of time on that, a lot of political resource and Capitol and all sorts of news attentions and news cycles. We're just diving into this impeachment, which all stemmed from Donald Trump's speech at Save America rally on January 6th, where he said something that they didn't like. And they're sort of trying to tar him with all of the fallout from the Capitol Hill riots, which I never thought was fair. And so the idea was that this was all just spontaneous. Oh my gosh, this all happened out of the blue. Nobody knew. Donald Trump incited it. That's how we can blame him. But then as soon as he wasn't impeached, the story transitioned a little bit. Now the law enforcement agencies who are responsible for Capitol Hill security, now they're saying, even in court documents, according to this article, that there was extensive planning and plotting by known extremist groups. And according to Christopher Wray on this clip, on this slide, he says there was a large amount of information that was gathered, but yet again, nobody knows what they did with it. Nobody knows what happened here. Why was the security failure so massive and so systemic? It went from the Sergeant at Arms over at the House of Representatives to the Senate, to the Capitol Hill Police, to the Metro Police, to the National Guard people, now to the FBI. Nobody knows what the hell happened, and they're all still trying to piece it together. They haul him in front of Congress, and we're going to see a lot of non-answers from him. So here is a clip. We do know that he is categorizing this in one particular way. He's saying that this is now domestic terrorism, which causes somebody like me, who is sort of a civil libertarian-ish type of person, who knows what powers the governments took in their initial response to terrorism after 9/11, and they were already using that here on people in the United States. That's what we learned from Edward Snowden. That's what we learned from Julian Assange and others. A lot of those have been rolled back. A lot of those sort of overstepping of surveillance boundaries have been rolled back a little bit, but the point here is that the government was doing these things under the guise of domestic security, national security, Department of Homeland Security, all in the sake of combating terrorism. Now, they're saying that terrorism is not even abroad anymore. It's right here in the United States. So what are the security implications for that for the everyday citizen? What does that mean for you and your domestic privacy rights or your civil rights as an American citizen? Well, we don't know, but we do know that Christopher Wray is categorizing what we saw on January 6th as domestic terrorism. We're still going to learn and glean what that means. What are the consequences of this categorization? Here he is earlier today in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee.
Let me start with a quick update on the investigation into the January 6th attack here at the Capitol. I was appalled, like you, at the violence and destruction that we saw that day. I was appalled that you, our country's elected leaders, were victimized right here in these very halls. That attack, that siege, was criminal behavior, plain and simple, and it's behavior that we, the FBI, view as domestic terrorism. It's got no place in our democracy, and tolerating it would make a mockery of our nation's rule of law. Citizens from around the country have sent us more than 270,000 digital media tips. Some have even taken the painful step of turning in their friends or their family members. But with their help, we've identified hundreds of suspects and opened hundreds of investigations in all but one of our 56 field offices.
I'd like to ask you, Director Wray, do you agree that the Capitol attack involved white supremacists and other violent extremists?
Certainly, the Capitol attack involved violent extremists. As I said, we, the FBI, consider this a form of domestic terrorism. So we've got a number who self-identify with, the Proud Boys or the Oath Keepers, things like that. We also have a couple of instances where we've already identified individuals involved in the criminal behavior who we would put in the racially motivated violent extremists who advocate for what you would call sort of white supremacy. So there have been some of those individuals as well.
Based on your investigation so far, do you have any evidence that the Capitol attack was organized by, quote, fake Trump protesters?
We have not seen evidence of that at this stage, certainly.
Thank you. Senator Grassley.
Yeah. All right, so that's kind of the big headline that's poking around a lot of the mainstream news sites. You'll see that FBI Director Wray comes out and confirms that Antifa wasn't involved in this at all because of that last little snippet there where he said, no, we haven't seen any evidence of these fake Trump supporters. So, largely I agree with him on some of those points, the ones in the middle that he makes where he's saying, well, Americans are responding to this. We've got a lot of investigations open. We're doing our due diligence, and we're seeing a lot of these cases progress criminally speaking. We're prosecuting these as crimes, which I agree with. I think they should be prosecuted as crimes. I've been consistent about that. I've said that repeatedly on this show. I don't think that anybody should sort of escape justice for this because of a political disposition, right? I was critical of the allegation here back when this happened that the white police officers were letting all of the white Trump supporters go free. I thought that was undermining the truth, number one, but also the legitimacy of the justice system. And we knew that wasn't going to be the case, that they weren't just going to go by the wayside. And the story has unfolded much in the same way that I predicted. The FBI is around the country, around the world, sweeping up individuals, processing thousands, hundreds of thousands potentially of images and videos. And you said, you just heard him say in every single state office, they've got people working on this stuff. Massive, massive investigation. Anybody who is being prosecuted or has been identified should be prosecuted, because if they're not, the other side is going to use that as a bludgeon to do Lord knows what with it. And so I'm not going to go down that road or down that rabbit hole. But the point here is they're crimes. They were crimes. They committed crimes. But we're seeing this modification of just standard criminal law in the United States, for which we have a lot of procedure. We've got case law, we've got Supreme Courts, we've got a framework and a hierarchy on how these cases are processed. And now they're sort of categorizing it a little bit differently. That a lot of these people are just, even the people who maybe just walked into the Capitol building after the fact, who, I'm just part of the tour defense, are those domestic terrorists, or what are we talking about? How are we going to define this? Because it's a little bit of a different category, which in my mind unveils or allows the government to pursue alternative enforcement mechanisms and sort of bend the rules of the Constitution and due process and those different sort of civil right protections that you have to be free from an over-encroaching law enforcement agency. And the reason why this sort of sticks out so badly to me is we've already heard from John Brennan, the former CIA director, who said that libertarians are now sort of in this category. We've also heard from Jen Psaki, the press secretary over at the White House, talking about domestic violence extremism. And they're creating these new categories for, we don't know who yet. We don't really know who they're going to throw in here, who's going to end up in this bucket. But it is becoming more and more prevalent. And when I heard Christopher Wray today speak in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee, it reminded me of an article that I had clipped a while back. And it was 1 month old today, posted over at NPR from Mary Louise Kelly. We may have covered it on the show, or I don't know if we just synced it or I just clipped it, but February 2nd, she posted this. Former CIA officer says, treat domestic extremism as an insurgency. Well, what does that mean? When it comes to domestic extremists, such as those who stormed the Capitol, a longtime CIA officer argues the U.S. should treat them as an insurgency. That means using counterinsurgency tactics, similar in some ways to those used in the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. The guy's name is Robert Grenier, served in the CIA station chief for Pakistan and Afghanistan. He says, we may be witnessing the dawn of a sustained wave of violent insurgency within our own country, perpetrated by our own countrymen. And without national action, he argues, extremists who seek a social apocalypse are capable of producing endemic political violence of the sort not seen in this country since Reconstruction. So, we're seeing a lot of this language being floating around. He's claiming we need national action. What does that mean? What is Christopher Wray talking about when he says this is domestic terrorism? Does that give them any additional privileges that, as a law enforcement agency, any abilities to do an end run around, I don't know, the Constitution, the Fourth Amendment, search and seizure rules, your ability to be free from government intrusion in your homes or in your areas where you have a reasonableness, an expectation of privacy? Where is this going? Well, we don't know. I mean, it's a lot of colorful language flying back and forth, but when they start categorizing people in this manner, typically means that there's something further coming down the pike. We don't know what it is yet, and Christopher Wray didn't really tell us much about what that is. What is domestic terror? What does that mean for the FBI? Does that mean you're going to be looking into all of this and you're going to have answers when we ask you questions about this? So presumably, this is the biggest problem that this country has had in a long time, you know, other than of course, coronavirus, but in terms of sort of domestic political activity, Capitol Hill, that kind of takes the cake on this thing. So you would imagine that the FBI director, the person who's in charge of all of this, not new, has carried over from the Trump administration and has previous experience in government. He's been around for a long time. You would guess that he has answers to some of the most important questions, and he's willing to share that with this country. Like, I don't know, for example, how did Officer Sicknick die? Here's a clip on that.
I want to know what happened to Officer Brian Sicknick. Tragic death as a result of that January 6th assault. There's been conflicting reports about his cause of death. Have you determined the exact cause of death? And is there a homicide investigation?
So I'll take the last part of your question first. There is an ongoing investigation into his death. I have to be careful at this stage because it's ongoing not to get out in front of it. But I certainly understand and respect and appreciate the keen interest in what happened to him. After all, he was here protecting all of you. And as soon as there's information that we can appropriately share, we want to be able to do that. But at the moment, the investigation is still ongoing.
So does that mean since the investigation is going on, you have not determined the exact cause of the death?
That means we can't yet disclose a cause of death at this stage.
But you have determined the cause of death.
I didn't say that. We're not at a point where we can disclose or confirm a cause of death.
Nothing, no answer, total non-response. This was one of the biggest foundational pieces of the entire narrative of the Capitol Hill riots. Remember, immediately, there were allegations in the media. New York Times ran with it. We clipped it and played it on the show where they were saying that he got hit in the head with a fire extinguisher, had a gash on his face, on his head, was transported to the hospital and died immediately or died shortly thereafter within, the 24 hours. None of that was true. None of it was true. Texted his brother, talked to the mom. Everybody, sort of said, oh, he may have got hit with bear spray and then suddenly he had to be transported to the hospital and he died. Tragic death. So sorry that he's lost. Rest in peace. May his family be at peace at some point in the future, but they're going to need some closure here. They're going to want to know, how did he die? Is their son being used as a political prop? It certainly seems like that to me, which is disgusting, reprehensible behavior. But remember, this was the foundational lie. New York Times ran with it. Everybody picked it up, and it was spread all over the place that Trump supporters murdered a police officer. It made it into the impeachment memorandum, not the article of impeachment, which was filed shortly thereafter, I think January 13th. After they had time to think about this was a line item, a bullet point in the Democrats' not the article of impeachment. That was a small 4 or 5 page document. In their big 85-page document, MAGA maniacs murdered Sicknick. I mean, that was one of the key points that justified the entire impeachment proceeding. So now, still today, 2 months later, we still don't know why or how he died. No idea. And the FBI director, person in charge of the entire investigation for the federal government, comes in front of Congress, in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee, and can't even shed light on that. Why is that? Well, the Washington Examiner a few days ago was trying to dive into it, and they found some more information. They said the FBI narrows the focus to chemical spray, and specifically a chemical spray video in the death of Officer Sicknick. The FBI reportedly suspects U.S. Capitol Police officer's death is related to some type of chemical irritant after ruling out that he died from blunt force trauma. So it was not the fire extinguisher. Capitol Police say Sicknick died the day after January 6th in connection to which prosecutors have charged more than 300 people. Investigators that are a part of the FBI homicide inquiry have uncovered video footage of Sicknick and other officers being attacked with bear spray that day, and they have pinpointed one person of interest, although they have not yet identified the individual, the New York Times reported. The assailant was captured on video talking about attacking officers with bear spray. A law enforcement official told the outlet both the FBI and Justice Department declined to comment on the matter. Investigators initially suspected that Sicknick, a 42-year-old Air National Guard veteran, had been hit in the head by one of the rioters with a fire extinguisher. Although officials now say that Sicknick's body showed no signs of blunt force trauma. So the Washington Examiner is telling us a little bit more about it. Apparently they've identified some people who were bragging about hitting the police with bear spray, and maybe that killed Officer Sicknick. We don't know. Presumably, they know. They did an autopsy. He's already been cremated. There's nothing else to look into. The body is gone. He's not with us anymore. He's been cremated. He had a ceremony at the Capitol building, and he's now interred somewhere. And that is not the end of the story. People want to know, how did he die? Because this was the basis of a lot of the narrative that we've been just living in for a long period of time. And it's important, I think, that we know what's going on here in order to determine the validity of the prior reporting, which we all know is garbage. So what's the point, I guess? U.S. State Capitol Police, they have another statement, February 26. They say the medical examiner's report on Sicknick's death, which followed the attack on Capitol 6, is not yet complete. All right. We are awaiting toxicology results and continue to work with other government agencies regarding the death investigation. Officer Sicknick's family has asked for privacy during this time, which we want to respect. And that the spreading of misinformation stop regarding the cause of death. Well, you could help us with that, okay? You could help us. The department and the Sicknick family appreciate the outpouring of support for our fallen officer. And so I understand toxicology results. I understand that sometimes these things take time, because they do take time. In fact, typically what they'll do is they'll use a machine called gas chromatography machine, GCMS, gas chromatography mass spectrometry. And that can take time. In a regular case, in a regular DUI case where somebody, maybe they didn't test positive for alcohol, those results come back fairly quickly. But if they have to do a drug analysis, the way that it works is they first want to identify potentially what is in the blood. So think about this differently. If somebody has alcohol in their system, you can pretty much see it. You can smell it. You know it's alcohol. You draw their blood. You test for alcohol. If it's a different drug, it could be one of a dozen drugs. You have no idea. A lot of the drugs can show some of the same signs and symptoms. Some will show aggression or energy. Some will be downers, some will be uppers. And so if you have a case like that and you have to identify sort of this weird potential concoction of a variety of different drugs, then that can take longer because they're testing for multiple different drugs. So the question would be here, did they do that initial screen? Did they identify? Did they rule out any drugs? Did they say that this was not, an overdose? This was not a suicide. This has nothing to do with anything that came from over the counter. Was there evidence that there was bear spray in his blood? They could give us more information about it. I think 2 months is too long for this. I think they should have gotten this back a lot sooner. And I know that they're going to use this toxicology report, but this is the country. And I've got a lot of criticism when law enforcement does this just across the board. I think that when police delay the results, or when they delay communicating about the results, or about anything, when they don't issue a statement just in general. Last week we talked about Angelo Quinto, and it was 30 days, or maybe longer than that, 2 months, since that young man was killed by the police, and no statements from them over in Antioch, I believe that was. No statements from them. Why are they not speaking out? Why? Because the investigation's ongoing? Well, we know what happens these days when we don't get communicated with. People don't like it, and it's not okay. The default here should be transparency. If the investigation is ongoing, that's fine and well, but they can start correcting the narrative right now. They could have started correcting the narrative a long time ago, but they allowed it to just continue. Why is that? Why are they not giving us more answers about any of this stuff? It's been 2 months. Toxicology reports should be back by now. Okay, this is one of the most serious homicides in this entire country. We've already seen this, and they've come out and they've clarified that. They said, yes, the FBI is involved. The entire U.S. Attorney's Office is involved. We have Capitol Hill Police, the Metro Police. Every single person is involved in this, basically, that we can think of. And they're just, it's just toxicology. Well, somebody call the toxicology lab and say, hey, Lou, get up, go run that vial. Let me know what the results say, because the country wants to know an answer to this question. And it's not just the country. It's not just me kind of bitching about this on YouTube. content warning, but it's also his mom, 74-year-old Gladys Sicknick, says he wasn't hit on the head. No, we think he had a stroke, but we don't know anything for sure. She said, we'd love to know what happened. She's said earlier this week she's still waiting to hear more about her son's death. She thinks he might have suffered a stroke. So 74-year-old Gladys is also wondering what is going on, and the government, for some reason, probably political BS, has said that, well, we don't know. The investigation is ongoing. How about you get to it then? Because there's a lot you don't know here, Christopher Wray. Wray, according to the New York Post, says pleads ignorance on domestic surveillance used by the FBI after the Capitol riot. So again, you're going to see here a lot of I don't knows, a lot of, well, we'll have to look into it. I got to coordinate with my other teams and all this garbage. It's been 2 months. This is the person who's in charge of the entire bureau. Why doesn't he not have more answers? Did he know? Did somebody give him the memo today that he was going to be appearing in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee and he better have some answers? Or did somebody just kind of pull him out of the restroom? Hey, Chris, they're having a hearing in there. You're late. Get over here. Oh, I'm not prepared. I don't have my briefcase. Go get my briefcase because all my answers are in there. Did he forget his briefcase? Here this goes. He said Tuesday he wasn't aware of whether subordinates are pursuing controversial domestic surveillance steps to track down participants in the January 6th Capitol riot. He wasn't aware. Not that they are or they aren't. I'm not aware of whether subordinates are pursuing controversial domestic surveillance steps to track down participants. Just wasn't aware. Can you say yes or no? No, I'm not aware of that. So can you tell me definitively, in the FBI, have you given any orders that say, maybe don't do those things that are more controversial? Do you have a position on that? I'm not aware of that. All right. Okay, that's fine. Let's continue on, Chris. Chris told senators during a Judiciary Committee hearing that he didn't know if FBI agents acquired large quantities of transaction records from Bank of America, as reported by Fox News, or if the FBI used geolocation data from a cell phone tower that dumps ID to attendees, as reported by The Intercept. So the FBI doesn't know about it, but Fox News knows about it. They know that the FBI used bank records from Bank of America. Fox figured it out. Christopher Wray couldn't do it. And The Intercept figured out that the FBI was using geolocation data from cell phone tower to take identification numbers from the people who were in the vicinity and match them to their persona. Christopher Wray didn't know about it, but The Intercept sure as hell did. They figured it out pretty quick. Senator Mike Lee from Utah and Josh Hawley, they pressed Wray for information on cell phone geolocation data, which raises legal concerns, especially because members of Congress and journalists were in the Capitol at the same time as the rioters. Okay, so you're not just capturing data from the MAGA people, you're also capturing it from Congress people, other security personnel. What if somebody who is monitoring these logs, or somebody who's, an intern at the FBI just kind of combing through Excel spreadsheets, sees some data from a top secret confidential communication from one person to another person that jeopardizes national security, and this goes, haywire, hypothetically. What's going on? This is kind of important stuff, and Christopher Wray doesn't have any answers for it. So Mike Lee says, quote, is the FBI accessing cell phone tower metadata from telecommunications company? Is that where it's coming from? Christopher Wray says, well, without knowing the specifics, without being able to drill into the specifics, it's hard for me to answer your question. Okay, so Lee says, all right, so let me clarify this for you there, Chris. Are there instances in which you're interviewing people based solely on information derived from a telecommunications provider providing geolocation information indicating that they were on or near the National Mall on January 6th? Okay, that sounds like a pretty specific question. Big, long sentence, very clear about what he's asking. Wray said that because the investigation is so large, quote, it's very hard for me to speak with any absolute confidence as to whether there's any interview predicated on any one specific thing. So not answer at all. Hawley later pressed Wray for an answer on, quote, whether or not the Bureau has scooped up geolocation data, metadata from cell phone records or cell phone towers. FBI says, I would not be surprised to learn, but I do not know for a fact that we were using geolocation data under any situation with connection with the investigation of January 6th. Non-answer. I do not know. Hawley pressed again on the allegations of Bank of America. Critics call it a fishing expedition to search for incriminating information. Wray says, I don't know any of the specifics. I'd have to look into that. Hawley asked if there were similar records were taken from other banks. Wray again said, didn't know. All right, so lots of didn't knows, just had no idea. You know, if somebody was in my, if this was somebody who worked here at this office, and let's say I put them in charge of one entire department, and I said, you need to know what's going on in your department at all times. If there are major issues, if stuff bubbles up and you've identified this as a problem, or sort of the people you're in charge of, if somebody's identified this as a problem, yeah, it's in your wheelhouse. You got to know about it. You have to be in control. You are the leader of that department, right? Something bad happens. I call them into my office. Hey, what happened here? I don't know. Okay, well, how about we just investigate that a little bit further? Can you tell me what happened here? Well, not with the specifics on that. I mean, that's a very important question. Well, I know it's an important question because this is an important issue. Maybe you should answer that. Maybe you should go and figure that out. Otherwise, maybe we should find somebody who actually has the answers, because Christopher Wray certainly does not. And it's shameful. Now, my hypothetical maybe doesn't hold water with you, because the converse here is he doesn't work for them. He works for the executive branch. He works for Joe Biden. He works for the Department of Justice. That's his administration. He works with them. So maybe he walks right into the Senate Judiciary Committee and he says, okay, idiots, what are you going to do about it? I don't have to tell you anything. Which is the same routine that we see very periodically out of Congress. Haul the big tech people in, Mark Zuckerberg, Jack Dorsey, Sundar over at Google. Everybody comes in, no answers, nothing. It's a political show. It's a whole spectacle. No new answers out of this. Very disappointing. Maybe we should have more of these so that we can get less answers out of them. It's ridiculous. Liberty or death. So we're going to jump over to some questions over from locals.com/watchingthewatchers. If you want to ask a question, head on over there and join up. Liberty or death says, Wray is such a squirrely, squishy guy. He and these senators seem like they discussed and decided on some talking points. A little Donna Brazile and Hillary action. Yeah, it was a little bit frustrating, I would say. That's putting it mildly. It was very uneventful today, which is a bummer. Anki Woe says, Wray was somehow able to ramble off a whole bunch of racial diversity stats of his agency, but couldn't remember whether Bank of America offered confidential consumer information to the FBI. Yeah, it's a great point. His vernacular is very good. He's out there talking about white supremacy. He knows the Proud Boys, Oath Keepers. He knows anybody who's in that little, he had no problem explaining that. White supremacy. Yeah, we're all over the white supremacy stuff. I got that covered. Don't worry about it. We're talking about domestic violent extremism. We're talking about domestic terrorism. We're talking about the Proud Boys, the Oath Keepers, and white supremacy. He's got a lock on that topic. But if you ask him about, I don't know, the regular, ordinary course of business, things like, well, did you have a private company literally scraping their customers' data and sending it over to you in violation of their privacy rights? I have no idea. That's a great question, Senator. I have no idea. Wow, that's a good one. How about this? Hey, were you scraping data off of the cell sites that were just gobbling up metadata of everybody who was in there, potentially even Congress people who have higher security clearances than you? Were you doing that? Yes or no? Whoa, that's complicated. It's not appropriate. There's an ongoing investigation, so we're going to have to keep looking into that. Liberty or Death says Antifa is an idea, but January 6th was domestic terrorism. See that? See how this works? The use of that language is not an accident. Can you say Patriot Act 2.0? I totally agree with you, Liberty or Death. I think this is where they're going. I think they're laying a framework for this. It's all going to be done in the name of racial equity, white supremacy, domestic terror, sedition, and on and on and on. We've already seen this before. We've already gone through this. We went back through this in 2001. Sharon Quidney says, I don't believe anything Wray has to say. He's just pushing the party line narrative that white supremacy is the main problem. I also object to the constant linguistic inflation attack, domestic terrorism, insurrection, rebellion, revolt, etc. It's just another one of their deflection tactics to provide cover for things like taking away our rights and the cover-up around Sicknick's death, not to mention bombing Iraq. It's a good point, Sharon. I think you hit a lot of good points on that. I don't have much to add to it. I think that it is largely a political tool at this point. They know that it was a horrendous thing, and they're going to get a lot of political momentum out of it. And it's really hard to come out and attack it, right? You can't come out and endorse anything that happened on January 6th. Yeah, that was great. Everybody's overreacting, because if you say that, then now you look like I don't know, a white supremacist, insurrectionist, domestic terrorist. So it's sort of a self-perpetuating claim. If you try to oppose it, well, they just say, well, yeah, see, you hate America. You want to undermine democracy. Arrest that man. Farmer's Daughter says, do you think the FBI needs time to spin it as needed? No, I don't think that they need to spin it because it probably doesn't serve them. I mean, if this served them, if this was bear spray and they could connect this back to that one individual, they would say, yeah, he murdered that person with bear spray. We already know about that, but we don't. It's probably because it's not good information. They're going to go through a lot of these other, commissions and inquiries. And then at the end of the day, 6 months from now, they'll say, oh yeah, here's the toxicology report. Yeah, it was a stroke. Yeah, I don't know. He had a high cholesterol. He had a heart attack. Sorry. But the whole country has been operating on the premise that he was murdered by the Capitol Hill rioters, which is just not true. It made it into the Democrats' own documents. Sliding Edge says, thoughts on Wray categorizing January 6th as domestic terrorism? Well, Sliding Edge, I think you may have missed the first part of the show. I'm not happy about it. I don't think that it works well for our country. I do not like the idea that we're using these sort of this language to elevate what, in my opinion, is already a crime. We already have crimes on the book. All this stuff was already criminal. Prosecute them. Fine with that. But when you start saying we're going to call it terrorism, we're going to sort of invoke concepts of insurgency, we're going to start calling libertarians domestic violent extremists, it is categorizing an entirely normal, benign demographic of people in this country who are expressing political opinions as something that they are not. And that is not appropriate in my mind at all. We have Liberty or Death says, I may have missed it, but in these hearings, have any of the senators asked about Ashley Babbitt being shot? Not that I've seen Liberty or Death. That one has kind of gone by the wayside. That officer, last I heard, was still in hiding. Don't know if that's still true. Don't know anything about that officer. Don't know if they even intend to tell us what happened there or if there's going to be any formal use of force investigation into any of that. I think we just got to get used to this. We have Jeremy Matrita says, withholding information only confirms what everyone knows is thinking. They only make themselves look incompetent by not answering the question truthfully. Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, Jeremy, but I just don't know. I think they probably know that. I mean, there's only a certain, most of the population is not as engaged as I am or as you are, right? We sort of live in this world, but most of the population, they're reading tech blogs, they're looking at makeup magazines, they're looking at, sports and all of that stuff, which is all great. That's fine, right? Not everybody should be involved in politics because it's exhausting sometimes. But my point here is that, a lot of the time what I think these hearings are intending to do is it's just going down the checklist, just checking the box. Okay, I appeared in front of Congress, got that one done, got that one done. But they know that time is on their side. And the longer that they can put between having to release information that hurts them and the things that they are trying to get done, the better that is for them. If they want to roll out a lot of this, domestic terrorism framework, whatever that looks like, we're seeing it, the framework being laid right now. We're still early in the Biden administration. I'm sure there are people watching this going, you're a conspiracy theorist. And this is all nonsense. They are laying the tracks down here. We've already been talking about it. Jen Psaki, I think one of the first days that she was in the White House press briefing room, she was talking about this domestic violent extremism, and I marked a pin in it right here on this channel. Now, the FBI director's coming out, same stuff, and it's just going to continue to happen on and on and on. And so if they want that agenda to be rolled out, well, they have to be very careful about releasing information that breaks or shatters that narrative. In this case, Officer Sicknick dying of a stroke, like Gladys said, might shatter that narrative. People will go, well, I thought that he was killed by the MAGA people, and he wasn't. So they're just going to continue to delay that, roll out the rest of this stuff, and then they can make the big reveal later down the road once everybody has already acclimated to these big changes that are coming from the new administration. Renal, New York Renal MD's in the house. He says, Robert, if there is some bizarre federal murder of civil rights chargers, can the attorneys bring up the fact that there was a systemic false narrative set forth in the media? The potential jury pool now assumes that this officer was murdered. So, good question, Doc. Generally speaking, what you would do is deal with this at voir dire. That's when you are asking the jury questions. And so you would just make sure that the jurors had not heard about this case. In particular, the specifics around Officer Sicknick. I think that we're going to see a lot of that coming up in the upcoming months. They're going to have to find jurors in the Derek Chauvin case that didn't hear about George Floyd. How do you find people that didn't hear about that, didn't see the video, don't know anything about what's going on? They're going to have to go and track those people down, which would be the same case here, right? So if the person who is subject to current investigation. As we said, the Washington Examiner said that the FBI has a person of interest that they've pinpointed. If they charge that person with a crime, he would be able to make those claims that he's already been convicted in the court of public opinion. But any defense attorney who's representing him, the judge would basically say, you can cure this in voir dire. So what if the media already convicted him? You're going to get a bunch of jurors on your panel that have never even heard about the case. They don't even know who he is. They never heard about Capitol Hill, or they heard something about it. They're going to be able to find those people, because even though it was one of the most obvious things that was all over the place it still is mostly all over the place. We're still talking about it. They're going to try to weed those people out so they can just get to, blank slate, tabula rasa people. We have Remark 2 says they would not have released Sicknick's body for cremation unless they had determined a cause of death. Yeah, I think that's an astute observation there, Remark 2. And did the family have an opportunity to have a second autopsy? We don't know. We don't know anything because they haven't told us anything. It's been 2 months. No additional toxicology investigations. That means they've already withdrawn the fluids from his bodies. It's already been tested. They can't run a couple extra tests for him 2 months from now? Give me a break. They know exactly what it was. What he's not telling us because the investigation is ongoing. Okay. So if they tell us why he died, what's that going to jeopardize? Or how he died, what is that going to jeopardize? Is the person who killed him now going to start creating an alibi? And if so, then it's a very weak case, right? If they can just come up with something, no, I didn't do that. I didn't have that. I didn't have those things. It's a pretty weak case. We'll see. Liberty or Death says, I have a feeling we will find out exactly what happened to Sicknick around the same time they solve Seth Rich's murder. For those of you not in the know, that means we're not going to figure it out. That's what Liberty or Death is saying. Nobody still knows what happened with Seth Rich. Nobody knows what happened with Sicknick. We'll see if we ever find out. Dr. Renal MD in the House says the Chiron on several MSNBC YouTube page says federal officers are closing in on a suspect in the murder. They quote the New York Times, but they never say murder. The media is creating a false narrative. Well, that's exactly right. They've been doing it since January 7th, really, since that New York Times article. Murdered with a fire extinguisher. Didn't happen. Total lie, fabrication. I understand that in the heat of the moment, but it also made it into the Democrats' impeachment memoranda, and they ran with it, as did the rest of the media. It's very dishonest, totally inappropriate, and it angers me. We have Nadar Blasir says, Chris Wray and his FBI are the real domestic terrorists in this country. Antifa plus BLM causing billions in damage to the government and private property damage all summer long was just a myth, but putting your feet on the sacred desk of Madame Pelosi is the real problem this country is facing. Tyrant. Yeah. It's because it's political, in my opinion, right? They're not concerned about property destruction. They're not concerned about Nancy Pelosi's desk or her laptop being stolen or the podium being ripped out of there. All that gets fixed. There is, the Capitol building's sacred, so it's a little bit of a symbolic insult. It kind of hurts to see that happening in a place that should be revered just for its historical significance. I can't say I revere any single member of Congress today, or haven't for a long time. So that's not what I'm talking about. But a lot of great men and women have gone through there, and it's a sacred place. That's a little bit different. But if you want to just break it down on dollars and cents, literally, it is just the damage from the Capitol building it pales in comparison to the damage that we saw for months, extended months throughout the summer. And no politicians were calling that insurrection. No politicians were calling that domestic terrorism, even though they were throwing Molotov cocktails at a federal court building, and they burnt down the 3rd precinct in Minneapolis for the police department. And those are both political institutions. They both enforce political rules. And they were trying to be destroyed. Massive double standard. Jeremy Matrita says, how about a new law that removes 4 laws off the books for every one new law? I would be so down for that, Jeremy. It is very, very frustrating that everything is criminalized and they're just trying to add some more on top of it. It's already a crime. They've already been charged with crimes. We all understand this, right? All of the people who were involved at the Capitol Hill riots, at least 300 of them, according to their own numbers, they have already been charged with crimes. So why do we need to classify them and categorize them as domestic terrorists? What does that do? It is going to morph into something else. It's going to morph into a removal of rights to firearms. It's going to morph into certain surveillance limitations or extensions. We'll see, but I don't like it. It's not good. All right, so let's change gears. Move on to our next story. Good questions. And as I mentioned at the start of the show, this next story's a little bit rough. Over the weekend, we learned that a woman by the name of Brittany Gosney murdered her 6-year-old son. Son's name was James Hutchinson. And this is not a comfortable story to think through, but there are some very interesting criminal issues that I think are in play, and we are going to go through them. So the outline for this segment is I want to show you a little bit about the background of the story. So obviously a mom murdering her 6-year-old son. All of these are still allegations right now. She just had her initial court date yesterday, and so this case has a lot of road ahead of it to go down. And what we want to do is just lay out the framework on what happened. Then we want to analyze the different laws that she has been charged with. Murder, and some lesser charges about moving a body. The quick run around here is that Brittany and her boyfriend, a guy named James, they took her dead son and they disposed of the body in a river. Horrible, gruesome stuff. So I want to break down what happened, but now she's claiming that she doesn't understand what's going on, that she's mentally incompetent, and that should be a basis for some sort of escape of criminal liability. And I want to show you how this works. I want to show you the different allegations that are sort of floating out there. The first charge that she's facing is murder, but I'm not sure that is provable at this point in time. And so I want to show you that and then show you some of the lesser included options and what her attorneys are going to be trying to do. Then we're going to look at the competency framework that exists in Ohio. I don't live in Ohio. I don't practice law in Ohio, but they give us a good understanding of how we determine whether somebody is actually competent to stand trial. They go through a formal proceeding, and we're going to wrap up with a nice little memory of her son, James Hutchinson. So let's go through the story. As I mentioned, a little bit of heavy lifting here, but there are some instructive things that we can learn about the law and about the system and about how these things happen. So let's dig into it. First, learn about this story from David Winter over on Twitter. He said, Brittany Gosney, her boyfriend, James Hamilton, were in court this afternoon. That was yesterday, March 1st. Brittany was charged with murder for allegedly killing her 6-year-old son, James Hutchinson. She and Hamilton, which is her boyfriend, are also charged for disposing of the child's body by throwing it into the Ohio River. Just absolutely awful stuff. Awful stuff. This is the young man, son. His name is James Hutchinson, and let's clean that up. He died. He was 6 years old, right? Awful. The story was posted today, 12:13 a.m. by Tim Elfrink over at the Washington Post. A mom reported her 6-year-old as missing. She'd actually run him over and thrown him in a river, police said. And this story, we're going to get into it. It says here, just after 10 a.m. on Sunday morning, so this past weekend, Brittany Gosney and her boyfriend walked into a police station in Middletown, Ohio with disturbing news. 6-year-old son, James, was missing. Middletown police immediately began searching, posting pleas for help and images of the red-haired child in black frame glasses, which is this image right here. Gosney, age 29, her boyfriend, 42, were lying, police said on Monday. In fact, Gosney had run over her son in the park days earlier after trying to abandon him there, according to police. And so pay close attention to that line. She had run over her son in the park days earlier after trying to abandon him there. Then she and Hamilton allegedly threw his body into the Ohio River. And so I want to just pause on this right now. You know, I'm not trying to defend these allegations or defend this woman if it is true that she did do this to her son. Awful, reprehensible behavior. I am a criminal defense attorney, however, and it is important that we understand how the process works. That's what we do here, is sort of detail and unveil the curtain behind some of this stuff. And so what I want to do is just point out a couple things. Number one, from this story, and we don't have any of the formal police documents. I don't have a probable cause statement. I don't have an affidavit, arrest documents or anything like that. We just have the charging documents and some clips that we got from the news proceedings. But the first thing that really stood out to me, we don't know whether she intended to murder him on this particular day at that particular time. Okay, this story says that she had run over her son in a park days earlier after trying to abandon him. So leave him, not murder him. So I'm not real sure where they got this information from, but this is in the Washington Post, which is reputable enough when you're not talking about their political biases. But the point is, we don't know from the facts yet whether this was an intentional murder or what happened when he was run over. More will be revealed. Let's get into it. Gosney was then arrested and charged with murder, abuse of a corpse, and tampering with evidence. Hamilton was charged with abuse of a corpse and tampering with evidence. 2 other children who live with the couple have been removed from the home by the state, the authorities said. On Friday night, 2 days before Gosney and her boyfriend reported James missing. So take a look at that. 2 days before, right? Which is a very, very long period of time to report that your son is missing. Police said that Brittany drove him and her 2 children to Rush Run Park in nearby Preble County in a parking lot near the boat ramp. She allegedly tried to abandon James. When he tried to get back into the car, she ran him over and left the park, according to court documents reviewed by WKRC, which I have not seen yet. Half an hour later, she allegedly returned and found James dead. So was this intentional murder? That's the first question that we're asking ourselves. Was this intentional murder? Okay, because murder, as we've learned on this channel, it requires, in most situations, what's called malice aforethought. You intended to go do what you did. And in criminal law, we talk about 2 components. We talk about mens rea, which is the mental state, guilty mind, culpable mind, somebody who is intending to go do that action. They had that guilty mindset, plus actus reus, which is the action. They have a guilty mind, they do something wrong. That action is the active part of the crime. You got to have a guilty mind and guilty acts. So here, did she intend to murder him? Well, she's being charged with murder, so just keep that in mind. Let's listen in, or let's look in. We have half an hour later, she allegedly returned and found James dead, put him in the back of her car, drove him home in Middletown. The next night, Burke said, Gosney and Hamilton drove to a bridge over the Ohio River, and they threw his body over the edge. When the couple reported James missing on Sunday morning, police were immediately suspicious because that happened on Friday night. It was a little unusual, because usually when you have a missing child, the first thing the parents do is contact the police. They said he was missing since Saturday night, but it happened on Friday. Detectives were quickly called in, and within hours, police and Preble County Sheriff's deputies had converged in the park to gather evidence. But Sunday night, police had called off the search. They arrested Hamilton and Gosney, who police said admitted to killing the boy and disposing of his body. Recovery teams began scouring the Ohio River for his remains, work that has been complicated by high water and strong currents. And I saw another article that, unfortunately, right now, the boy's body has not been found. On Monday, yesterday, a judge set a $1 million bond for Gosney. In court, Gosney told the judge she had a, quote, learning disability and didn't understand the proceedings, but Burke disputed that claim in his news conference. Said, she seems to be communicating fine. She understood right from wrong. She understood her constitutional rights, he said. And you see this a lot in court, right? The prosecutor, the judge, everybody goes, yeah, whatever. You understand everything. Because this happens a lot, actually. People will say, I don't understand. I had no idea what I was doing. And so there is a system in place to get to the bottom of those claims. You can't just go into court and say, no, I don't understand anything that's going on here, and therefore you can't prosecute me. Try harder next time there, judge. It's not how that works. They say, all right, we got a procedure for this, and we're going to go through a little bit more of that later in this segment. But here is Miss Gosney, who is in court. You can hear a little bit of her. This is clipped from a news clipping, so you're going to see some news and hear some news commentary. But it's from Local 12 News, charged with an unthinkable crime. And here she is, you can sort of hear her saying to the judge, I don't understand what's happening. A little bit more framework on this. This is her first court date. So the charges have just been filed. Obviously, this happened on Sunday. She got charged. I think the court documents were filed yesterday, Monday, March 1st. Today was the first day she saw the judge. And so typically at an initial court date, I don't have the whole proceeding here clipped, but the judge will tell her what you've been charged with. These 3 counts, they face the maximum amount in jail, maximum time in prison. You're entitled to a public defender, set release conditions. Typically somebody would argue for release. She got a $1 million bond placed on her. So it's sort of the initial stuff. She'll get appointed a public defender if she can't afford to hire an attorney. And the judge just says, okay, that's it. We set a new hearing date. And so at some point in this proceeding, he asks her, do you understand? You understand what I just said to you? She goes, no, I have no idea. What are you talking about? Here she is.
Appointed counsel, ma'am.
I don't understand.
Brittany Gosney appeared in court today to hear the charges against her: murder, tampering with evidence, and abuse of a corpse.
Well, I have a learning disability, so I'm not understanding what you're saying.
We're very confident she understands the court procedures and understands her actions. She knows right from wrong.
At a press conference today, Middletown's police chief said that after Gosney brought little James' body back home, she and her boyfriend, James Hamilton, also in court today, took the body to the 275 bridge near Lawrenceburg and threw it into the Ohio River. On Sunday, Gosney and Hamilton went to police claiming James was missing. It took just a few hours for a confession. Crews today searching the river for James' body.
All right, so awful stuff. She's in court saying, I don't get it. I don't understand it. We're going to break down how that works. So here's James Hamilton. He also in front of the court. This guy here, he appears before the judge. He's accused of helping his girlfriend dispose of the body. And here's a little from his clip. Very quiet. Yeah, so you can't hear what the judge is saying, really. He's going through an arraignment, telling him what he's being charged with, making sure he understands everything, setting his bond, and that's it, right? So he's going back into custody as well. This is from Brittany's case, so I was able to pull up some of the documents, and you can see 3 charges: violation, 1 for murder, 1 for tampering with a corpse, 1 for abusing a corpse. Oh, sorry, that was tampering with evidence. The other one is abusing a corpse. Brittany Gosney, 3 different charges, counts A, B, and C, it looks like. And then when we move over, we can look at some information about what happened. So a lot of activity yesterday. So this is for Brittany's case. Only on the murder charge. We're just looking at the murder charge, which is the most serious of the charges, of course. And the complaint was filed yesterday. Case set for an arraignment on March 1st, changed to March 1st at 1:30 p.m. Then they scheduled a preliminary hearing, which is 6 days from now on March 8th at 1:30 p.m. Set a public defender, and then set a bond at $1 million on murder or all other charges, which is, kind of, I think, standard. But it's interesting to see it juxtaposed to some of the other cases that we've talked about here. Remember Kyle Rittenhouse, his was a $2 million bond, and a prosecutor wanted to make that $2.2 million, and that didn't happen, right? And the argument here is, well, Kyle killed more people, so maybe it should be higher. And hers is, well, she killed a 6-year-old. Maybe hers should be higher. And so you sort of see how this plays out. This is happening in Middletown, Ohio versus Kenosha, Wisconsin. And so you can sort of play this game around the country, but kind of right on track, $1 million for a murder charge that, of course, she's not going to be able to pay or raise money to support a release. So she's not going anywhere. More information from her case. You can see she was born 1992. And I wanted to dive in here on this 1992 on this section. So this is the murder charge, 2903. She's got a public defender, it looks like. We've got a status conference date scheduled on March 8th, so that's coming up. And that's it. Murder charge. So let's take a look at the statute. So 2903.02. This is the murder charge. Murder. And remember when I was explaining this a little bit earlier, right? We need all of the different elements of the underlying crime. So if Brittany Gosney is going to be convicted of murder, she's got to check all of these boxes. And I want to show you a little bit how these interplay with one another and how her defense attorneys might work to move this down. So think about this from a defense attorney's perspective. They want to drop this down. She's being charged with murder, as we can see here, but there are less serious violations that might also fit. And so a defense attorney is just going to look at this first charge and say, all right, well, let's see if this fits the facts of the case. If not, we're going to try to move this down. We're going to negotiate the agreement down into something lesser, like voluntary manslaughter, involuntary manslaughter, or even a reckless homicide. So let's see how these all interplay with each other. So first and foremost, murder, 2903.02, no person shall purposely cause death of another or the unlawful termination of another person's pregnancy. So we're going to see a lot of this pregnancy language. They just kind of throw that in there. No person shall cause the death of another as a proximate result of the offender's committing or attempting to commit an offense of violence that is a felony in the first or second degree. So probably not that one. So they actually charged her with 2903.02, as we can see right here. So we're in the right statute, 29.03.02. And then we have punishment that's delineated down here. So really what we're talking about is no person shall purposely cause the death of another. So the big question in my mind here is purposely. Did she purposely cause the death of another? These are the elements. Purposely caused what? The death of what? An animal? No, another human being. So those are the 4 elements. So you can see right out of the gate, if this was a situation like the Washington Post was summarizing for us from the court documents where she dropped him off, abandoned him. She wanted to abandon her child, which is reprehensible. I'm not trying to excuse that behavior at all. But did she purposely cause the death of him? Right? If the situation here was she tried to abandon him so that somebody else could take care of him. She didn't want to do it anymore, whatever. She's having a meltdown. She's a psycho person. She really is mentally incompetent. There's a lot of different reasons why that could happen. If you're trying to get to the root cause of it, none of them are excusable or justifiable, but you can help you to understand what was taking place here. So if the son, if he is running back towards her vehicle and he gets caught under the vehicle. We just had another situation here in Arizona like that, where there was a guy, took his daughter, mom went towards the car to get the daughter back. He ran over her. She died. He got arrested. He got booked into jail. Then he died by suicide in jail. Awful situation happening here in Arizona. Sort of similar to this. But he did not intend, from my reading of the news, to kill her. As she was trying to get back into the vehicle to get her child out, he ran over her. She died. So if that same thing happened here, you can imagine it would be even easier with a 6-year-old. If mom throws him out of the car, he's running back towards the car. He tries to open the door, gets caught under the wheel. He gets run over. He's dead. Awful, horrendous. I'm not excusing this. But is it intentional murder? Did she purposely kill him? Because that's what the government has to prove, and they have to prove that beyond a reasonable doubt. And if the government fails that, if they charge her with this statute and they can't prove their case beyond that reasonable doubt, if they can't show that she purposely intended, then they're going to lose this charge. And this woman is not going to be convicted. I think that's probably a very low likelihood, but just let's go through this again. So this is murder, purposely caused the death of another. So are there other potential charges that may also fit that the defense attorneys can try to move towards? So let's look at voluntary manslaughter first. No person, while under the influence of sudden passion or in a sudden fit of rage, either of which is brought on by serious provocation occasioned by the victim that is reasonably sufficient to incite the person into using deadly force, shall knowingly cause the death of another. Okay, so don't think this one fits, right? I don't think it fits at all, actually, because what is the 6-year-old going to do that is going to amount to serious provocation? Anything? I don't think so. Occasioned by the victim that is reasonably sufficient to incite the person into using deadly force. I don't think that this one fits at all, so we can just move on right by that. We can also take a look at involuntary manslaughter. No person shall cause the death of another or the unlawful termination of another's pregnancy as a proximate cause of a result of the offender's committing or attempting to commit a felony. So this might actually be closer. Okay, so let's take a look at this again. Let's break this down. No person shall cause the death of another. So you see here what's missing? Purposely, right? It's not purposely. This is the murder charge. No person shall purposely cause the death of another. We go to involuntary manslaughter, not there anymore. No person shall cause the death of another. So what is the intent? What is the guilty mind? Or what is the sort of the mens rea, the criteria that exists that would justify this charge? And so they're saying that it's basically the proximate result of committing or attempting to commit a felony. So now you don't have to necessarily have intention or a guilty mind in order to cause the death of the person under this statute. But if you did have it for the underlying felony, then we can sort of carry that over into this charge. So in Brittany's case, the hypothetical would be she is committing a felony because she's trying to abandon her child. She did have the intent to abandon her child. That, I think, is probably without dispute at this point in time. So that was a felony. You can't just drop your kid off in the middle of a park, I would guess. I didn't look into the statutes in Ohio, but I would guess that's on the book somewhere over there. So if that's a felony charge and she was committing a felony, she had the intent to commit that felony. Well, what happened is, in the commission of that felony, something went wrong. We use this example all the time, sort of in bank robberies, right? The getaway driver didn't intend to cause somebody to die inside, but they're still held liable for that because they were a part of that underlying conspiracy, and they get the criminal liability as well as the other people who actually went into the bank. So same story here. Something went bad in that bank robbery. The getaway driver is responsible for that bank robbery. Same here. She tried to abandon her child to commit a felony. She left. He tried to get back in the vehicle. She ran him over. That's it. So I think you could make an argument for this charge. You could say, well, it wasn't purposely. She didn't try to run him over, but she did run him over in the commission of a felony, and this would be involuntary manslaughter, which is a totally different charge. Right? Let's take a look here, see if we can glean anything from subsection B. It says here, or a minor misdemeanor code. Okay, so none of that is particularly relevant. The next charge that it could potentially be: no person shall recklessly cause the death of another or the unlawful termination of another's pregnancy. So what you would do here is you would look up the word recklessly. You would say, what does that mean? and you would negotiate for that. You would say, nope, she didn't purposely cause the death of another. She recklessly caused the death. And it's a big difference for her guilt. Whoever violates this section is guilty of reckless homicide, a felony in the 3rd degree versus a felony in the 1st degree. Drop it down levels in severity. So we'll see. We also have negligent homicide, neg hom, we call that. No person shall negligently cause the death of another or the unlawful termination. And if you're convicted of this, a misdemeanor of the 1st degree. So now we're dropping it even out of the felony category by means of a deadly weapon or dangerous ordinance as defined of the revised code. So this might apply too. Now that would be a misdemeanor in the 1st degree, which is way low. So you can see sort of the structure here that they're delineating for the mens rea, for the mental component of this offense. You have murder, which is purposely. Then you have a lower tier, which is a class 3 felony. Go to class 1. You go a lower tier into recklessly causes the death. Then we drop it down even further. Well, it wasn't reckless, but it was negligent. Drops it down to a misdemeanor. So that's where her defense attorneys are going to be running with this. Now, the claim that we heard about at the beginning where she was saying, I'm not competent. I don't really understand what you're doing or what you're talking about. Let's dive into that because there is a procedure here. You don't just get to go into court and say, well, I don't remember running over my 6-year-old. Don't remember, thinking about it for a few days and then throwing his body in the river. Now I'm confused. I was able to do all of those things, but now I'm just confused. Maybe I should be released because I have a learning disability. Does that work in court? No, it doesn't. Here's how it works. So the competence to stand trial is defined by Ohio statutes 29, 45, 38. The issue of a defendant's competence to stand trial, if it's raised, the court, upon conducting a hearing provided in this section, which we're going to jump to next, so 29, 45, 37 of the revised codes, if the court, after this hearing, finds that the defendant is competent, then the defendant shall be proceeded against as provided by law. So I'm going to give you a framework on this. Here's essentially what's happening is she's going to claim that I am not competent to stand trial. I am not capable of understanding the nature, the severity of the charges against me. I cannot understand the proceedings. I can't participate in my own defense. And so when you start talking about, waivers and things, you get knowingly and voluntarily, you got to understand what's happening against, towards you, because if you don't, then is that really due process? So this happens all the time in criminal law. People say they don't understand it. And so what the court is going to do is they're going to pause the criminal proceeding. They're going to say, all right, you're right. We need to look into this. If you're claiming that you don't understand, then we're going to have you go and see a psychologist, a psychiatrist, whatever. We're going to go through competency proceedings. You have the normal criminal proceedings that just sort of go down one track. And we're going to say, all right, we're going down this track. We're just going to pause. We're going to take a little bit of a right turn over here. We're going to go determine whether you're competent or not. If you're not competent, then we're going to say, all right, well, what can we do about that? Can we restore you to health? Can we make you competent? Can we give you some drugs, see a psychologist, do some rehab, get off of the drugs, get mentally stable? Okay, fine. We're going to put you in a rehab facility. We're going to have you go through some formal rehabilitation. And when I say rehab, I don't mean like drug rehab. I just mean rehabilitation, so that a person who is not competent is now made competent again. And if that is the case, then we just send them right back onto the main road. We send them right back into the trial path where the criminal proceeding picks back up against them and they move forward. What happens if they're not competent? Well, then we have to talk about that. What are long-term solutions there? They may be basically involuntarily committed for the foreseeable future until they become competent again. If that happens, and if they do, then the criminal proceedings would pick up again. So that's what this framework is detailing here. Let's go through it just very briefly since I just basically explained it. In a criminal court of common pleas, the defense attorneys and her team may raise the issue of the defendant's competence to stand trial. If the issue is raised before trial, none of that matters. The court shall conduct the hearing required or authorized under subdivision V within 30 days after the issue is raised, and unless the defendant has already been referred to evaluation. They're going to send her over to an independent screener. somebody who is a psychologist that is designated by the Director of Developmental Disabilities within 10 days. And so they're going to do a report on intellectual disability. They're going to have what's called an intellectual disability evaluation, which is interesting. They call it something different here. The defendant shall be represented by counsel at the hearing. If the defendant is unable to attend the hearing, then they will appoint counsel. Subsection E is interesting. The prosecutor and the defense may submit evidence on the issue of the defendant's competence to stand trial. A written report of the evaluation of the defendant may be admitted into evidence at the hearing by stipulation. So that means if the prosecutor agrees with the defense and they both want it in the record. But if either the prosecution or the defense objects to the admission, the report may be admitted under different sections or under different statutes or rules. The court shall not find the defendant incompetent to stand trial solely because the defendant is receiving or has received treatment as a voluntary or involuntary mentally ill patient before. So if she comes back and shows a bunch of records that says, yeah, yes, I do have a learning disability, I have been found to be mentally ill previously, that alone under Ohio law is not enough, right? They need a sort of a contemporaneous showing of incompetency. Okay, that may have been a while ago, but what about now? What about here and today? And so the defense can build up their record. The prosecution can build up their record. They'll both submit documents. She will go see a psychologist that's designated by the Developmental Disabilities Director, and she'll have a screening done. And then at that point in time, that report will go back over to the court. The court will decide whether they're competent or not. If they are competent, if she is found competent, then they can just move forward with the proceeding. And this is interesting. Subsection G, a defendant is presumed to be competent to stand trial. Okay, so the presumption, the starting point is competency. We all start at the competency line. Just claiming it doesn't mean that you get any special privileges. We're going to check. We're going to take a look and make sure that you're competent. If you are, we're going right back to that starting line. Not getting any special privileges or any benefits here. If after a hearing, the court finds by a preponderance of the evidence that because of the defendant's present mental condition, the defendant is incapable of understanding the nature and objective of the proceedings against the defendant or of assisting in the defendant's defense, the court shall find the defendant incompetent to stand trial and shall enter an order authorized by 294538 of the Revised Code, which basically is that remediation plan. Okay, if she is found incompetent, they go for a remediation plan. They want to restore her to competency. If that's the case, then they can bring this back, down the road. A couple interesting points. She's got to understand the nature and the objective of the proceedings. So they're going to ask her a lot of those questions. And there are psychologists and psychiatrists that specifically practice in this area. They sort of specialize in it. So they can figure out pretty clearly whether you're manipulating or trying to, lean on the lever a little bit too hard. So they'll be able to get to the bottom of it. And the presumption is she's competent. Her defense team, they can show by a preponderance of the evidence, which means they got to have enough evidence to convince a judge that, it's like 51% more likely than not that she is not competent, which is a tall order, right? She's driving a car. She thought about it, help the boyfriend, wrap up the body, throw it in the Ohio River. She has some judgment-making abilities. They went in, talked to the police. She ultimately, knew that she got caught. So a lot of decision-making capability there. We'll see where it goes. Now, on there's nothing happy about this story. There's nothing high about it. But I just wanted to show you that there is some community support going on there around the home. The memorial has grown markedly at Little James Hutchinson's home. Some of the messaging is anger at a system that can't seem to do enough to end child abuse and neglect. So there's Little James. Lot of stuffed animals and roses and little cars. Good stuff. Justice for James. We have how many kids have to die. Help end child abuse. So people are, of course, unhappy about it. Terrible story, but sort of a lot of love is pouring in. So if you're in the area and you want to go, if you're in Middletown, Ohio, and you want to go share some love for Little James, you can go and do so. It looks like the public is responding, and so we'll all say a little prayer for him tonight. Awful story. We'll see what the government does and where this case goes. We'll probably follow the story around for some time. We'll see what happens. Sharon Quidney says, sounds like to me she might have been trying to punish her son for doing something by threatening to abandon him, then she accidentally ran over him. So then they didn't know what to do. So they hung onto the corpse until they came up with something. Were there drugs or alcohol involved? That would be my bet. Yeah, very interesting point. And since they waited a couple of days, all of that may have dissipated from their system, which I'm not real sure that is a good thing. I think they may have had a little bit more opportunity to, to investigate this, or even build a defense. They could blame the drugs essentially, and now they can't do that. So NY Renal ND says, if true, probably the most cruelest crime I've heard of in a long time. Yeah, it's a very long time. A mother abandoning her child and killing him and then throwing him in a river. Meanwhile, some lawmakers would have us believe that banning guns would prevent violent crimes. Food for thought. Yeah, it's a good point, Renal. These stories are hard to talk about. These are the most difficult stories. As a criminal defense attorney, I can make cases for defending anybody, anywhere, at any time, and I can even, sleep well at night knowing that the bigger principles are what I am really fighting for. It's not for bad people doing bad things. It's about the presumption of innocence. It's about due process. It's about going through and making sure that the government, which has the total monopoly on power, that they are doing things correctly. And by sort of staying on this side of the scale of justice, we keep those things balanced. And if it weren't for a strong, vigorous defense, in my opinion, we would have an overbearing government that crushes civil liberties, crushes some of the fundamental protections that make our justice system work. Probably the golden rule, which is the presumption of innocence. And so, in a situation like this, even though this is the most heinous, it's one of the most heinous crimes I've ever read about, just cruel inhumanity. Your own son, it's stuff that you can't even conceptualize. But we got to protect the presumption of innocence, and there's bigger principles at play here. Again, I'm not excusing anything that she did or these allegations, but she still deserves the same due process that all of us deserve. And it's very easy, and these cases are the most important cases that deserve a defense, because just looking at the headlines, it makes you feel icky. Even talking about these stories, it's like, I got to go take a shower after this segment. Awful. But it's for a bigger cause. It's for a deeper fundamental meaning. We have a presumption of innocence in this country, and we have an obligation and a duty. I think it's a sacred duty as defense attorneys to hold the line. If the government has their case, and it sounds like they do, it sounds like this is going to be a home run case for them. They've got admissions, they've got evidence, they're going to find the little boy's body. These people are not going to get off on anything, right? But they still have to go through the process. We don't just abandon due process. We don't just abandon the presumption of innocence because we have one very heinous, awful, horrendous, inexcusable, reprehensible crime, and probably two people who are cut from that same category. We still have to protect the foundation of our system. And so that's why we talk about these stories, but it does feel it's just the worst. Liberty or Death says, have you handled this type of case? So no, I can't say that I have. I have not handled a case where something this egregious has happened. I'm going back through the Rolodex. I've handled some gruesome cases involving children, but typically it didn't involve a death, and they're more sort of sexual assault types of crimes with young people, not as young as 6. I don't think I've ever worked on a case with a victim as young as 6. It's thankfully it's far and few between, but it's gruesome, and it makes my stomach churn a little bit, but it is important that we, I think, adhere to the bigger principles of our justice system. Otherwise, we lose justice entirely. Hack Consulting says, as a prosecutor, how do you take the defensible and make it indefensible? How do you take the defensible and make it indefensible? So as a prosecutor, do you mean maybe as a defense attorney? So in other words, how would I defend this case if it's totally indefensible? Well, so what you do is you just make sure that the government is not crossing any lines, right? They still have to go through the formal proceedings. They still have to get the warrants and the subpoenas, and they still have to disclose the evidence. And, there's a lot that they have to do to comply with the rules. And that's sort of what I'm a stickler about. They can't bend the rules around the margins. I know it sounds easy to do in this case. They can't do that because the rules, the principles, the constitutional protections that we have, those are eternal. Those are sacred. And we can't just bend those in the cases that we feel particularly gross about, because it's convenient to do so. We have, all right, so that's our last question. That is from Hack Consulting. All right. So, all right, let's change gears a little bit. That story was, some heavy stuff, but I think it is important that we understand what is happening there. All right, in our last segment of the day, we now have a third accuser for Andrew Cuomo. Sort of predicted this a little bit yesterday. Once you got one, you got two, the floodgates might be opening. We might have more than three, but today we certainly know that there's another one. So we have three. Breaking: a third woman has accused Cuomo of over-the-line behavior. Incredibly, a photographer caught the moment and this look on her face. So we're going to get to that image. But first, let's get a little bit of a background here. We've got Cuomo accused of unwanted advance at a wedding. Says, "Can I kiss you?" Anna Ruch had never met Cuomo before encountering him at a crowded New York City wedding reception September 2019. Her first impression was positive enough. He was working the room, toasting the newlyweds. He came upon Ruch, now 33, thanked him for her kind words about her friends. But what happened next instantly unsettled her. Cuomo put his hand on her bare lower back, she said in an interview on Monday, yesterday. When she removed his hand with her own, she recalled, the governor remarked that she seemed, quote, aggressive and placed his hands on her cheeks. He asked if he could kiss her loudly enough for a friend standing nearby to hear. Miss Ruch was bewildered by the entreaty, she said. She pulled away as the governor grew closer. Quote, I was so confused and shocked and embarrassed, said Miss Ruch, whose recollection was corroborated by the friend. Contemporaneous text messages and photographs from the event. I turned my head away and didn't have words in that moment. Shaken, Miss Ruch said she later had to ask a friend if Mr. Cuomo's lips had made contact with her face as she pulled away. The governor had kissed her cheek, so now we have physical contact. It's the act of impunity that strikes me, Miss Ruch said. I didn't have a choice in the matter. I didn't have a choice in his physical dominance over me at the moment, and that's what infuriates me. And even with what I could do, removing his hand from my lower back, even doing that was not clear enough. Unnerved and baffled, she posed for a photograph afterward. Okay. Right. Once the governor walked away, Miss Ruch's friend approached her with a look of alarm. It was when my friend looked at me and said, "Are you okay?" with such genuine concern in her face that I realized how obviously inappropriate it was, not only to me, but to those around me as well. In a text message a day or so later to the friend, Miss Ruch wrote, I'm so pissed, referring to the governor as this guy with an epithet in that description. After collecting herself that night, she said, she hoped to speak with the governor before he left the reception and confront him about his behavior, but by then she couldn't find him. I would have rather just said it that night. I wanted to say that wasn't okay. So here's the picture. Right, there it is. So there's Cuomo. Anna Ruch said she felt uncomfortable and embarrassed when Mr. Cuomo placed his hands on her face and asked to kiss her. You see this woman over here. She's got a little bit of a O face going on there. And this woman in the background too, she's looking going, what the heck is he doing? The background pictures sort of tell you everything. Two women going, that's inappropriate. She looks inappropriate. She looks uncomfortable. Much bigger man, much smaller woman. Apparently she refuted the hand on his back a few times and was not happy about it. Turned her face away when he was going in for the kiss and kisses on the cheek. But then stuck around for a picture. Okay, so we have some reactions from around the interwebs. We got Guy Benson says, okay, look, I'm a huge Cuomo critic. I think the nursing home cover-up is the scandal. Previous harassment accusations, also serious because of boss-subordinate dynamics. This one, non-colleague, social setting, ask permission, creepy, handsy, big age gap, sure. Scandal? And that was my critique yesterday. I mean, I was sort of laughing at the sausage gate that was consuming the media. Lots of calls for investigations. Yesterday, we heard from AOC. We need an investigation. We also heard from Elizabeth Warren. We need an investigation. We have both senators. Chuck Schumer wants an investigation. And the other one, what's her name? She ran for president. She's also in New York. She's calling for action. We saw Nancy Pelosi, House of Representatives. She wants some information on this stuff. We also saw Letitia James. They're appointing a special counsel, the special investigator. They want to go dive into this stuff because it's just enough is enough. And today we have a new person who goes by the name of Kathleen Rice. She is a representative. She says the time has come. The governor must resign. And so I was thinking back in my memory bank of, some other politicians who have traditionally been very handsy. And so, I was thinking about this story yesterday and I'm thinking it was a sausage joke. He was just joking with her about a big sausage to eat at some event She thought it was funny. He thought it was funny. She holds the big sausage up. They take a selfie with the sausage. And that was, inappropriate behavior. And then he had another conversation with a woman who was an executive assistant who felt like she was sexually harassed. Okay, not going to impugn her feelings, I guess, but she stuck around the office. She got a different job as a health advisor in a different department, stuck around. So obviously it wasn't that horrendous if she still wanted to work for the man. I mean, this is my opinion. I don't know. And then there was another one who, same story. Okay, so now we're on woman number 3 who had hands on her face. Totally inappropriate. I would never do that. I don't touch anybody if I can help it. Anybody. I would never do it. I think it's inappropriate, and it's totally creep show behavior. I don't endorse it. Don't support it. Not trying to defend it at all. What irritates me the most about this story is the massive double standard that happens here. To me, this whole thing feels like it's just a dog pile. Like the media is just having a field day with this stuff. They're really thrilled that they can go and slam dunk on Cuomo. And I don't like Cuomo. I don't love anything about the man. I don't support almost anything that he's ever done ever in the history of the world. And it's weird for me to kind of come on here and be like, this is a bunch of nonsense thus far. If there's more evidence that comes out, I'm reserving the right to revise my opinion. Okay, if he's pulling Harvey Weinsteins with people or doing, other, we've seen a lot of this some really bad stuff come out over this last, 4 or 5 years. But this isn't it. This is just, some egomaniac politician who is touching a bunch of people. We have a record of this. We have other people who have done this in this country, and the media was silent about it. Actually, one of them just got elected to the presidency. Do you remember this image? This was back from 2009. Here's Joe Biden, who is vice president at this time. What is he doing? He's brazenly planting a kiss on the lips of Chula Vista, California Little League usher in 2009. So just an usher. Just gives her a big fat kiss on the lips. All right. So maybe this is something that he did after he was enshrined in Little League's Hall of Excellence. So Joe Biden, I didn't know that. He's in the Little League Hall of Excellence. That's great. So he's out there kissing people on the lips. I've never been a politician. Is this just something that they do? Here's another one of Joe. He's in a warm embrace with Lisa Murkowski. Yeah, this one's kind of, I would say, mostly innocent. She's given him a hug. They've both been in the Senate for like 175 years, so they know each other very well. They've done a lot of nothing together for a long period of time. This happened during a 2011 congressional swearing in, and so they're getting a little bit, a little close. Okay, a little bit close. I've been working with my business partner for a long time. We don't get anywhere near that. We also have Biden over here. U.S. Navy veteran, so Ruth Severino. This one's, kind of benign, although this woman looks like she's kind of having a little bit of a panic attack right there, but that's okay. So Joe Biden just kind of lunges on her back, one of those things. 2011 Veterans Day Parade. This comes over from the AP. This one came from CQ Roll Call, another one from the AP. These are all summarized on a New York Post story. Then we get to the next one. We've got Biden with another kiss, some other woman who is not his wife, as far as I can tell. And this story says Biden gets around on the campaign trail, also posted from the AP. He kisses another woman on the mouth in this 2012 photo taken at an event in Zanesville, Ohio. All right, so we have some more kissing on the lips. Don't know if he asked permission before doing that or what happened there. Cuomo asked for permission. He didn't. We don't know in this case. Here's another one with Joe. Snuggles up to a woman in a Florida restaurant, 2012 re-election bid. Getting pretty close. Getting pretty close. We got some skin-on-skin contact there. That one is a little too close for me. Then we have this one, which is just very interesting. We have bikers give Biden a side eye as he cozies up to a female motorcycle rider at an Ohio diner during a 2012 campaign cycle. So he's basically straddling her from the back. Very close contact there. This guy's looking at her going, what the hell is happening right now? This is bizarre behavior. This guy's looking over here at this guy going, what are we doing, man? Let's just get on our hogs and ride on out of here. So interesting image. Not much news about this in the media. Here's another one. We got a 2013 swearing in. We have this person who I think used to be a senator, not anymore. He's looking at Uncle Joe, who is getting real close again here. We have some distance, no physical skin-on-skin contact here. So we have a little bit of separation. I would say maybe 2 inches. Her hair is sort of coming out a bit. We have Elizabeth Corker, wife of Senator Bob Corker. Yeah, that's who that was. So Bob Corker's in the background. He's looking at Joe going, bro, that's my wife, dude. What are you doing? You're getting too close. Back up. Congressman looks on in the foreground. He's not, yeah, he's looking right at Uncle Joe there. So a little close. Same day, you can tell from the same suit, right? So he's just feeling very handsy this day. Couldn't get enough of the ladies at the 2013 swearing-in ceremony. Here he embraces Senator Tammy Baldwin inside the old Senate chamber. So another senator, very close proximity. We have direct skin-on-skin contact here. In fact, this looks like cheekbone-to-cheekbone conversation on the backside of this. We don't know what Joe Biden is doing with his mouth or where that is. I don't know if he asked permission for that. What's going on here? This is interesting stuff. Then we go over to a 2013 holiday party. He pulls the behind-the-back move on the Hill's Amy Parnes at a holiday party in 2013. This one drew criticism after his photo circulated on Facebook. So this is, he's getting in there. That is not appropriate, folks. When you're in high school and you do that, they separate you. It's not appropriate. 3 feet rule, okay? This is how you dance. 3 feet. Keep it distance. Joe Biden violated the high school rule, and that's not appropriate. And look at her; she doesn't look particularly happy about it either. Probably this is her husband. He's sort of, look at him. He's sort of angling away. He's looking in this direction. He's going, this is a very uncomfortable smile. That is not natural at all. He's saying, yeah, I'm laughing right now because my wife's getting molested by the vice president, and I'm stuck here in a sandwich between the vice president's wife. While this assault is happening right in front of me, what can I do about it? Nothing. So I'm just going to stand here and smile nervously. Here's another one involving some children. So here's Joe Biden leaning down and giving this young woman a nice little kiss on the forehead. Looks innocent enough, I would say. But Biden plants a kiss on the head of the incoming Senator Majority Leader Mitch McConnell's niece at a 2015 swearing-in ceremony. And then we have this one here. This is the meme that still permeates around the world. I don't think this meme has been made illegal yet. It could be made illegal, but I don't know. At this moment in time, it's not illegal. In another headline-making gesture, Biden puts both hands on Stephanie Carter's shoulders and whispers in her ear as her husband, Ash Carter, is sworn in as the Secretary of Defense. So this guy is just talking to people who are interested in what he has to say because he's going to be the new Secretary of Defense. And then Joe Biden's back here just creeping in her ear. And so this one we have seen a lot. They basically cut him out. They cut her out of the image. And so we have this Uncle Joe meme that they just are pasting on front of everything, in places where it shouldn't be. So what was that, like 10 images that we just went through right there in about, 10 minutes? Pretty quick, pretty easy. Didn't hear much about that during this last election. Not hearing much about that right now. Now, to be fair, Joe has sort of gotten hands off of almost everything. He's not really talking to anybody these days. So he's just kind of kept behind the doors, which is a good thing, because if he's out there, then we see a lot of this type of stuff. But why was the media so mum about this when we've got evidence? This evidence was around for a long time. These things happened in 2013, 14, 15. Where are the recriminations here? Where is the claims that, or the demands that there's an investigation into any of this stuff, or that Joe Biden should resign for this? I mean, this is, none of this is any different. And this is just physical contact. This is not verbal statements. So presumably Joe's got a whole laundry list of those that I just don't have here today. But the point is, if Cuomo deserves to be investigated and resign and potentially prosecuted for crimes, I just read that his latest lawyer was from Harvey Weinstein, the same lawyer who represented Harvey Weinstein and some others, I think Woody Allen, and a high-profile sexual defense attorney, for a sausage conversation, for some inappropriate conversations, for some jokes. If they're all right, then I think we should just apply their same standard. There should be some investigations into Uncle Joe, and we should probably ask him to resign as well. We have Hack Consulting says, how many affidavits have been filed against Cuomo? How much of these are media interviews, reports, and hearsay? So I haven't seen any affidavits. I think that's a 0. And how much of these are media interviews? So all of them, I would say. And I think all of them are. And I think they are all hearsay. So I have not seen any formal evidence about these claims. Now, there is an indication that I think the first woman did talk to the chief counsel and did also talk to, HR or somebody like that. We covered that story yesterday. I can't remember off the top of my head. But if that is true, then there should be some documented proceedings in there, right? You work for the governor's office. You would imagine that they have a sexual harassment policy. They have remedial measures. They have an improvement plan. If this stuff happens, they have a formal written process that they go through in order to deal with it. So I would imagine that it was documented somewhere, but I haven't seen any of it just yet. Next question comes from Jeremy Matrita. Said, I certainly wasn't there and don't condone the alleged behavior, but just about anything can be said about a photograph. Would this picture be considered hearsay or whatever the legal term is for a picture? So not kind of. It's a great question. It kind of depends. So this stuff is tricky. So it depends on what the purpose of the introduction of the evidence is. If the purpose of the picture is to prove that he sexually harassed her, I don't think a judge would let it in for that purpose. If it's to show that he was there at the party, that's a different purpose, right? If he says that I wasn't there, they say, yeah, it was. The purpose of that introduction is to show he was physically there. But if they were going to use that to say this is sexual harassment, well, no, I don't. I think that would be hearsay because it's being admitted to prove the truth of the matter that's being alleged. In this case, that there was sexual harassment, and there are explanations to that, right? He could say, no, I asked for permission. We were having a conversation. He has a whole different interpretation of the event, and so that alone would not be enough, in my opinion, to incriminate him. We have _shades. Says, I don't doubt some or all these women incidents may be true-ish. However, this is a bone to get him out of the nursing home murders, and his fellow Dems are all engaged to assist him since it's also on them. Yeah, so sort of like he's the sacrificial lamb, right? This nursing home thing was a mess. So we don't want to talk about COVID. We don't want to talk about the COVID response. We don't want to blow up this nursing home investigation into a never-ending, spectacle. So we're just gonna get rid of Cuomo, not because of COVID. COVID was great. Excellent job on COVID. Keep that narrative going. No, we're going to change gears a little bit and say now it's about his sexual improprieties, which until this point in time I have not seen much of it, honestly. And I was. I always look forward to slam dunking on Cuomo, but I can't do that today because there's just no evidence there. And this might change, right? If we come back a week from now and he's doing the Anthony Weiner on TikTok or something like that, well, then we can reevaluate our thoughts and claims on this story. But we haven't seen that yet. We hear three different women now having conversations about conversations that they didn't like. And that standard is way too low, in my opinion. It requires more than that. All right, we have Bumalickit. Says here in Texas, our governor declared 100% open for business. I saw that. Congratulations, Texas. Congratulations. They have no mask mandate, although common sense is applied at all times, which thankfully is still prevalent here in Texas. How will the governor of New York manage to govern New York and reopen his state with all the pressure? Good question. Are people still living in New York? I heard that everybody was fleeing there. I think everybody's leaving California and New York. There's a demographic map. It shows where the population is moving. Arizona is out of control. Everybody's moving here. It's ridiculous. Houses, everything's going through the roof. All right, we have See the Veil says, how is it okay that they can go after Governor Cuomo for inappropriate behavior, but they cannot go after him for covering up his action against seniors with the nursing homes by putting COVID-19 patients in nursing homes? Seriously, this is somehow justice. Yeah, it's just, it's a media shift. So I think that, Ma pointed this out yesterday, in fact, on the show. Said, no, they covered it. So I think maybe that they did cover it, but they're just waiting for that door to close, and they're opening up another one very quickly. I think that's the only explanation. I can't think of another explanation. Why is this such a big story for the last 2 or 3 days? I go on the news. I want to talk about interesting things. We have a sausage video that we have to talk about yesterday. Okay. We have Hack Consulting says, I disavow the hypotheticals alleged against Cuomo. I defend Cuomo and believe he is innocent. Well, there you go. You should be a defense attorney, Hack Consulting. That's a pretty provocative stand, isn't it? Yeah, these are just conversations. Now, I know they didn't like them. I know that they were uncomfortable, but is that sexual harassment? Does that warrant an investigation for the attorney general? Did anything that you have heard from these three women warrant an investigation from an attorney general? I have not heard a single thing. Not one. Jen McClellan says, how much weight do these, quote, borderline allegations have? Do there have to be 5 more or 20 for a conviction? Well, there needs to be something more than this. There needs to be some evidence. Right now, it's the closest things that could be maybe criminal would be he did actually have a physical kiss with somebody. Maybe. And there were some disputes between them, and she had moved, but she stayed in the same office. And so, is that a crime? Or was this miscommunication? Was this sexual harassment? I don't know. But we need more evidence. This is my point. Look, I'm not trying to defend Cuomo. I think he's a creep show. I think that he's inappropriate. He's an egomaniac, just like all of the other politicians are. I'm not trying to excuse any of his conduct at all, not even a little bit. And if that is something that you're gleaning from this conversation, that is not, let me correct that right away. But my issue here is, what is the line? What is the standard for prosecuting somebody in a court of law or in the court of public opinion? Right now, we just heard from Rutch is her last name, and she's got a picture that looks creepy, and she's got a conversation that she had where somebody asked for permission, she said no, and that was the end of it. Put a hand on the back. She didn't like it, but stuck around for a picture after the fact. Now that it's becoming a national story, boom, there she is. Pops up. Me too. Okay. We need more than that in our society. We need more than just mere words and allegations months later, sometimes years later. All right, we have NY Renal MD says, you would need a 5-hour show just to show the cringeworthy pics of Biden touching children. Yeah, I didn't clip all of them. There's a lot more where that came from. And it was just swept under the rug along with all the Hunter Biden stuff. Nobody wants to talk about it when it's their candidate. So my question is, why is Andrew Cuomo not their candidate anymore? We saw this major just sycophants in the media over this last year, really talking about, oh my gosh, Cuomo's doing these press conferences. Gosh, this is so regal. He's so in charge. Write a book, Andrew. Going on all the shows, just kind of playing patty cake with everybody in the media. So what happened? Why are they just throwing him under the bus now? If they really care about standards, if they really care about women, if they really care about Me Too movement, if the language and the physical touches are so inappropriate, apply that same standard to the rest of the politicians in your party, because you're not doing it. And it's a double standard that is reprehensible. And Cuomo's going to get the brunt of this. That's fine. Whatever. It's Cuomo. Like, I'm not going to shed a tear over that guy. But I am concerned about the standards and about the media reporting, and I don't like when there are two of them, one for the people they like and one for the people that they don't like, because at some point we're going to end up in the bad category. And I want the same rules to apply across the board, right? How would I want to be treated? If some woman somewhere said I said something inappropriate sometime 10 years ago, I want to be skewered in the court of public opinion for that? No, I don't. And I don't want anybody else to either. You, Cuomo, anybody. Now, if there is concrete evidence that they can prove in a court of law, great. Look what happened with Weinstein, Harvey, right? He's done, gone, because there's hard evidence about that case. But there isn't any here. And if that changes, I'm happy to come on here and modify my take on it. But we got to look at the evidence, and that doesn't exist right now. Hack Consulting says, just like yesterday, I made a post in regard to S.H. Cuomo. I made a new post regarding the Coof debacle. What is that? The state took subconscious offense to the federal investigation, leading the administration to act like erection frogs when they ended up on a route of malfeasance and not properly checking their numbers or policies. All right, well, I'm going to have to look at your post there, Hack, because there's a lot of fun words in that statement. I don't know what the Coof debacle is or erection frogs, but I'm interested in learning more about both of those. We have Dr. Renal MD from New York says, speaking of high school, people have been expelled for universities for just accusations. Biden never had to answer for any of this. Yeah, it's true. Yeah, look, people in this country, men in particular, they get skewered over these accusations. I see it firsthand on a daily basis. I've seen and represented people where this is just speaking in broad strokes, generalizing a lot here. These are stereotypes, but they exist for a reason. It's typically the men who are charged. The allegations are against the men made by women. And every time I hear believe all women, I just go, are you living in reality? Come to my office for like a day. I'll show you how this works. I got to get client consent, and I really can't do that. So, don't take me up on that offer. But my point here is there are a lot of women who say certain things that are not true, and they do it for a number of different reasons. And men do it too. Men are not exempt from this stuff. It just happens to be one direction because the police, when they show up to any of these disputes, both sides are lobbing insults at each other. She did this. He did that. He's responsible. She's responsible. Who broke the bowl? He did. No, she did. Okay. The cops just say, I don't want to hear it. Guess who's going to jail? The guy is. That's just how it works. So that's some nice male privilege right there. Men, they always go to jail. 99 out of 100 times. Very rarely does the woman go to jail, and it's usually when it's very clear that she was the instigator. And most of the time, wake up the next morning, they come into an attorney's office, they get out of jail, they all realize they all said a bunch of BS that was not true at all. Neither one of them. But it's all written in the reports, and it's all documented. It was two people in a heated moment, lobbing insults at each other, making accusations that just aren't true. And so people's minds change and their thoughts evolve, and people will create narratives that are not accurate. 30 days later, she might have just woken up and said, I'm just so sick of all these men catcalling me out on the streets. This has been a repeated situation. And back in it just starts lining them up, right? Creating her own narrative about this systemic sexual harassment and oppression that has been going on her whole life, when in reality, maybe that's not so accurate. Or maybe it is. Okay. I think Cuomo's a creep, but we have to make sure that the standards are set, because we're talking about very important issues here. Cuomo or not. Croc1 Alpha says the meme where he is kissing his daughter on the lips is banned from Facebook. I got a 3-day ban posting it. Kissing his daughter on the lips. All right. All right. So Maz in the house says, let me switch over here. What sort of evidence is not considered material to an alleged charge? I think this is a good education question. Oh, Ma, that is a very broad question. So when you're talking broad strokes with evidence, one of the first things that you want to ask yourself is it relevant to the accusation? Then if it's relevant, then you have a lot of other sort of foundational, we spend basically, I think it's a year or one semester or a year in evidence. I mean, talking about all the rules of evidence. So once something is relevant, then we start asking questions. Okay, is this more probative than it is prejudicial? Are we going to admit this evidence into court? And so it's such a broad question that I could talk, for days about it. And I can't really answer it unless you're more specific about what specific type of evidence. But I think here, what we have are allegations. We have some evidence, I would say, very little evidence as far as I can tell. We have some allegations in the forms of statements, which even by themselves, I'm not sure that they cross that line of sexual harassment or criminality, to be sure. We have 3 different claims that mostly are stemming around conversations that took place, some physical touch, I think in 2 of them, one with hands around the head, and then one with, a hand on the back, and then one with an actual kiss on the lips. So, you could interpret those as being assault charges, right? And that would essentially be all that you would need. You would need these women to come into court and testify. Their allegations alone are not evidence, but they would have to come into court and testify. That would be evidence. They are witnesses. They are victims, allegedly, and their testimony would be the evidence. But right now, these are just interviews, and I haven't seen much more, right? We haven't seen any. Think about just some of the other cases that we've seen. With Anthony Weiner, we saw text messages. There were actually pictures of his genitals flying around out there that we knew that he sent over to a 14-year-old. Okay, he went to prison for that. Weinstein, same type of stuff. All these criminal allegations. He's in prison for the rest of his life over it because there's more there. Now, this might just be the tip of the iceberg. I don't know. There may be more stuff that is coming down the pike, but but at this point in time, this evidence, if you're a prosecutor, you're looking at it, you don't have a case. They're going to start investigating it to try to make one, but the media is already convicting this guy and saying he's got to resign, he's got to be removed from office over stuff that I just don't think, I'm sure a lot of people disagree with me on this and think I may be being chauvinistic or anti-women, but I'm not at all. I'm just saying that, we have to have a standard. I certainly do not believe all women. You can take that one to the bank. I don't believe all people at all. I don't believe all anybody. Because people lie. And I've known that from experience. And so anybody who just goes out there and paints with broad strokes that we're just going to believe all people for anything, I think is being naive, and they're not living in the real world. We have Jeremy Matrita says, Rush always pointed out political distraction stories for what they are. I think Hack Consulting is onto something. So I actually like this take, and I hadn't thought about this on my own. This is why I love this show so much, is because I'm sort of getting real-time feedback from people. You know, I wasn't really, I couldn't put a pin in why I thought, or why this was happening to Cuomo. Maybe to cover up the nursing home stuff. Maybe to mute his presence on the national stage. Maybe because AOC wants to run for something, or she wants to be the next governor, or somebody else wants to run for governor. They're tired of Cuomo. Who knows? I don't know. But I actually like that idea. Maybe they're trying to puff up this one bad thing to hide another bad thing, or to place less emphasis on that other bad thing. Hack Consulting says, early Christians used to kiss each other on the mouth. It was described in the letters in the Bible. However, I am an American and not a Greek or a Jew or anything else. Maybe a little Japanese one day if I get a citizenship there. As for, quote, I should be a criminal defense attorney. Thanks. I'm learning well from the best. That the best would include you, you humble guy. Oh, Hack. You little sweetie, you. Thank you so much for saying that. You know, I think it's a great point that, you know, there are different cultural norms that exist in the world, and that's okay. That's not a bad thing. I like that, actually. I think culture is a great thing, and we want more of it, not less sort of, I don't know, a dilution of culture around this country, which it sort of feels like where we're going. And I'm not saying what Andrew Cuomo did was sort of, you know, early Christian tradition. I don't think it was that at all. But you have to understand that people are operating from different premises, from different contexts. For some people, you know, a kiss on the cheek or something like that. You know, I've been around Europeans. I've been to Europe. Everybody kissing on the cheeks. Okay, well, that's a little bit weird for me as an American, but that's all right. We'll do that. Right. And I've been to other parts of the world where they do things differently. And that is sort of an example on the macro scale, on a global scale. But even within the United States, people have different experiences and different traditions. Not every single human interaction is racist, okay, just because somebody said something. Not every single dialogue that you have with somebody is sexual harassment. Not everything I do, everywhere I step, every breath I take is just stemming from white privilege just because I'm existing on this planet. We can all live our lives, and there's going to be some times that you bump into people in the world. We talked about this in law school. It's called sort of the crowded world theory. Okay. You can't wrap yourself in bubble wrap everywhere you go and expect never to be offended, never to bump into somebody, never to drop something on the subway, never to get injured, never to be offended. Okay. Men are going to be provocative and cross boundaries. Women have to traditionally deal with some of that stuff. I'm not excusing it. It's inappropriate. I don't behave that way. I would not want my sons to behave that way. But we have to understand that we live in a world where this type of stuff happens. And not every time that something happens, does it amount to something that is heinous, criminal, that should result in an AG investigating you or being canceled. I mean, the standards are so, everybody's walking on eggshells right now. Until we see more from the Cuomo stuff, I just think it's just a big show that's largely irrelevant. Liberty or Death says, just curious, where did you go to law school? So I went to law school. It's at a school called Phoenix School of Law. They're not around anymore. They changed their name into Arizona Summit Law School, and they're also not around anymore. So I typically don't talk about that just because it's not around anymore. I'll tell you this, though, Liberty or Death. You're probably maybe the fifth person who's ever asked me about that. Most people just don't ask about it because they just don't care. We have Hack Consulting says, Coof is COVID. Erection frogs is something similar to what YouTube doesn't want you to talk about. Oh, okay, I got it. Essentially, I was providing a defense for COVID debacle of Cuomo where they cannot change or not. I want them to change, though, and stop making mistakes. So Coof. All right, so Coof, got that. Erection frogs. What do we need for the Second Amendment there, Hack? Throw that in the chat. What are we talking about? Do you like my boom boom sticks? Do you like that? We got election frogs. Lots of frogs in 2020, and we have boom boom sticks going around. All right, so all right, we've got Feisty Lady says Brittany Gosney, she has 2 other children that were with her at the park. Depending on the ages of those children, can either side use statements, etc., as possible premeditation and intent? Can Brittany as their mother refuse to allow them to give statements? Ooh, good questions, Feisty Lady. So let's break those down. She's got 2 other children. Depending on the age of those children, can either side use statements as to possible premeditation and intent. Yeah, so it's a good question. So it's a lot of it's going to depend on their age, and I think that yes, they will probably. It sort of depends on how this case goes. If she's putting up a fight on this, and this case is looking like it's going to go to trial, then they actually may want to bring those children in as witnesses. Now, normally that's sort of a big no-no. You want to leave children out of it. Even children as, I would say is, 14, 15. The courts are very, very hesitant to bring young people into the proceedings because of the nature of the proceedings. Extremely volatile, massive amounts of stress and anxiety, even for lawyers, even for people, even for judges who've been doing it for a long period of time. You still go into a courtroom, there's a little bit of reverence you feel, a certain amount of awe that exists, and you just want to connect. You want to sort of understand that if you are bringing children into that environment, it may literally cause damage to them for the rest of their lives. So you want to be very cognizant about that, and the courts are. They just don't like to bring them in unnecessarily. So if it gets to the point, let's say, for example, Brittany, they offer her a plea deal. They say, yeah, you're going to prison for the rest of your life. Take this deal. Otherwise, we're going to be seeking the death penalty. She says, yep, I'll take it. That's the end of that, right? We don't need to hear from the children. They don't need to get involved. But if, let's say, Brittany goes through, she wants to bring this case to trial. Her defense attorneys are arguing no intent. Therefore, that murder charge shouldn't stick because it wasn't purposeful. Then they may want to bring in the children. They may want to get permission from the court. What the court would do would appoint essentially what's called a guardian ad litem, sort of counsel for the children, who's going to interface with the court. So the children are just not on their own. They would have their own attorney that's appointed by the courts to help them through that process. And so you can see there are a lot of interplaying issues here. But Brittany, as their mother, refused to allow them to give statements. Probably not. So I think what they'll probably try to do is maybe deem her to be unfit and take custody of the children away from her, probably very quickly. Maybe, I don't practice family law or spend much time on these issues, but maybe sever parental rights, especially if she's going to be in custody for years pending the outcome of the case. So those underage children are going to have to be dealt with. They're going to have to find them homes, resources, security, and safety. So a lot of issues there. It could go a number of different ways, but can Brittany refuse to allow them to give statements? Probably not, just based on the custody thing and the fact that she's probably going to lose her right to have any physical custody or legal guardianship over her children anymore. And the other statements, I think they'll be able to get whatever they want out of those kids. And a lot of it is going to depend on the age of those children. So, we'll see. Great questions, though. We have Onion says, hey, Robert, I am new here. Good work. I want to check my ideas here. This is all part of the Great Reset agenda. The criminals will run the world and we will be happy. Also, the narrative is crafted to divide the country to or drive it to civil war. Thoughts? Great question, Onion. Very good one, actually. And I wanted to let me tell you about this. So on Clubhouse, there are a lot of different apps, rooms that you can go into. Clubhouse is an iPhone, iOS only app, and I've been poking around on a little bit. I hosted a couple rooms last week, and I'm trying to decide whether I like it or not. Last week, I was very into it. Now I'm sort of not so much. But there are some interesting conversations taking place there. One of the conversations came from a room that I was in where we were talking about woke language. There's a lot of these woke rooms. And what I'm seeing on Clubhouse is that people are sort of dividing into two different camps. And what's interesting about Clubhouse is you have this sort of digital stage and they bring people up onto the stage. So you have a stage and you have an audience. And so what they'll do is they'll set a topic of the room. In this room that I was in, they were talking about wokeism and about why people talk a certain way and why this culture is sort of developing throughout the app. And let me give an example of this. So I was in a different room where they were talking about, I don't know, some sort of woke issues that were happening. And it was a very weird room to be in because all of the people who were on the stage communicating with one another, they're all chatting back and forth via voice chat. They're all talking in like literally a language that I don't really understand. And they were communicating in a way that felt very unnatural to me. They were saying things like, hold on, I have to pause you right there. They were giving trigger warnings. They were saying, I'm going to have to, I can't even remember what they were saying, but something about I have to go and be assertive to protect the space of somebody else. So in other words, one person would speak up and say, I have to go protect the space for Karen. because Karen doesn't have the ability to speak up for herself. So somebody else is going to dive in and speak up for her, and said that I have to clear out space in this room for her to speak, and, trigger warnings and all sorts of just weird stuff going on in there. And so people on Clubhouse are talking about this. Well, why are they doing this? Why are they communicating in this way? And some people say, well, it's based out of compassion. It's sort of a generation that doesn't want people to feel triggered. They don't want to be offensive to people. They know they've been sort of indoctrinated in our schools to think that words are dangerous. Words can hurt people. And that leads to trigger warnings, and that leads to the whole culture that you see over there. And I kind of get that. I kind of understand it, but it didn't feel like it was right. I went into a different room and somebody brought up a very interesting perspective. I haven't really fleshed out this idea. I don't know much about it, but they introduced a new concept called an accelerationist that I had not heard of before. What is an accelerationist? Well, it's somebody who wants radical, massive change in this country. And so in order to achieve that change, what do you have to do? Well, you can't operate in the current environment, because the current environment has rules that are set up to perpetuate the system. We're going to perpetuate capitalism. We're going to perpetuate the yahoos, knuckleheads that we have in Congress. And it's just going to be basically the same. Unless we can make some radical changes at a more foundational level that will cause people to say, well, I don't like the system anymore. We're going to change it. And so the allegation here was that many of the people who are sort of in alignment with this woke culture, or this cancel culture, or this anti-free speech, this dangerous information, this we're only going to allow stuff that we want allowed, right? We're going to ban books. We're going to get rid of Dr. Seuss. We're going to change Mr. Potato Head. All of these cultural things. We're going to fight over bathrooms. We're going to fight over locker rooms. We're going to fight over all sorts of the cultural stuff. And if you have an opinion about it, you're not even allowed to discuss it. Why? Because it's triggering to somebody. Or if you're speaking, it's because you're speaking from a position that is less valid or not valid at all. This is white privilege. This is systemic racism. This is the institutional patriarchy. Okay, these are disqualifying words and disqualifying concepts that prevent you from joining in on the conversation. And anytime you try to join in on that conversation, they just say, well, that's your white privilege. And if you respond and say, no, it's not. I actually have a valid point based in facts, based in rationality. This is a multivariate problem. It's not just white people. It's happening across the board. Cops are bad in general. They say, that's your white privilege. So it's self-reinforcing. So every time you speak out, it just reinforces itself. Well, why is that? And how does that work structurally? It's accelerationist. It is to cause people to feel like they're not being heard, like they're not a part of democracy anymore, like America has failed them. And what does that lead to? What's the next logical extension of that? An overthrow of the system. It's revolution. It's dramatic political change in this country. And so by design, and many of the people who are engaged in woke conversation, or this woke concept where everything gets canceled that they don't like, they control the narrative. Anything that you say that disagrees with their agenda is because of some other external factor that invalidates your ability to participate in the dialogue. They want that to happen because it's going to usher in that new era. Interesting idea. Hadn't heard about that. But if you're sort of somebody who likes to play around with the idea that maybe there are some, puppet masters who are kind of moving things around, the idea here that they want to put in place some fuel to trigger that upcoming wave, sounds like an interesting thought to me. Curious what you think, iOnion. Great question to end the show on. Thank you for that. Those questions, of course, came over from locals.com. We got a lot of great supporters over there. I want to thank a few of them. We got S. Crutcher. We got Sarah Smothers. Big thanks to Ma Fox. Big thanks to Faith Joy. We got Pinky 2 in the house. Sach, Cody Bear. We got Osak. We got C. Wolf. Dr. EMB. We have Jen McClellan we just saw. On My Knees. We've got Lead Shed. We got Savdi. We've got Clock Doc Want to Know in the house. We have Lana 12. All these people are over at Locals. We also got Gust Click. We got Bumma Lickit. Saw him today. We have CA Java Bean. We've got Jax 842 in the house. D Nice. And then we got one new person signed up yesterday. We got LT13. Welcome to the program, my friend. And we also had John M16 and then Simwala, Carl, TOS Forever, Ruler Law, and then we have Linda913. So I want to thank everybody for joining us over there on locals.com. It's a separate platform. It's at locals.com/watching the watchers, but we were able to sort of build a little bit more of a freer community over there. You know, YouTube says that we can't talk about certain things. We've got to play by their rules. It's their playground. And so we're trying to comply, but there are other conversations that can happen elsewhere offline on a different platform that I think is more suitable for the hard issues that are maybe not so woke that you might have to comply with in some of these different mediums. So I would appreciate your support over there. Thank you to those of you who are already over there. It means the world to us. Thanks for supporting the show. Other great things you can get if you head over. Copy of my book. It's free. Download a PDF over there. You can also get a copy of the slides that we saw today. Get a copy of the impeachment party templates. Get a copy of the existence system documents, as well as any links and conversation. And the real reason to go over there, great people. A lot of awesome people over there. And so you know where to go. Locals.com/watching the watchers. Lastly, but not leastly, I am a criminal defense attorney right there at the R&R Law Group. Where, you know, we help a lot of good people who have been charged with crimes. We help them get through the system. We want to make sure that they come out whole without being destroyed by the justice system. And we do a good job at that. So if you know anybody in the state of Arizona that has been charged with a crime, things like misdemeanors, domestic violence, assault, criminal damage, urinating in public, you know, these things happen. So if you happen to know somebody who needs some help, we'd be honored and humbled if you sent them our way. We offer free case evaluations. We'll make sure that they leave our office in a better position than when they found us. And we would be honored and humbled if you sent people our way. We'll take good care of them. So that's it for me, everybody. I want to thank you for being a part of the program today. We'll be right back here, same time, same place tomorrow, 5 p.m. Arizona time, 4 p.m. in California, 6 p.m. Central in Texas, 7 p.m. out there on the East Coast. Everybody have a very lovely night. Sleep well. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.